Konnichiwa and welcome back to the Osanshow. My name is Anissa and I'm the host of this podcast. In this show, we talk about some of the 90,000 different species of animals that we have here in Japan. So if you like animals and you like Japan, this is the perfect podcast for you. ぜひ聞いてください。In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Japanese Racoon Dog, or Tanuki in Japanese. And you might be thinking, Japanese Racoon Dog? Raccoon? It must be a raccoon. Actually, no, it is not a raccoon. The Tanuki is a type of canid, which includes other animals such as wolves, coyotes, foxes, and also domestic dogs. So actually, the Tanuki is more related to your domesticated dog than an actual raccoon itself. The Tanuki can be found in many parts of East Asia, including China and Korea, and also in Russia, and surprisingly in Europe as well. But why in Europe? We'll get onto that later. It was originally thought though that this raccoon dog had 6 different types of subspecies which lived in different parts of the world. However, due to recent scientific discoveries, it was actually found that the raccoon dog does not have 6 types of subspecies. The raccoon dog, which exists in other parts of the world except from Japan, so the kind of mainland raccoon dog, is separate to the Japanese raccoon dogs that we have here in Japan, so the Tanuki. And this is just really recent study as well, so it's really interesting to know the Tanuki that exists in Japan is actually not the same species as the Tanuki that exists in other parts of Asia. Not only was this discovered recently, but the Tanuki that exist in Japan, the Tanuki are not one species here. They're also divided into 2 subspecies, which is the Hokkaido Tanuki and the Shuk Tanuki. You might be thinking, what is a Shuk Tanuki? This is my abbreviation for the Tanuki that live in Shikoku, Honshu, and Kyushu. So for ease, we'll call it the Shuk Tanuki. These 2 subspecies do actually differ in their appearance as well, with the Hokkaido subspecies being larger than the Shuk subspecies, and the Shuk subspecies having larger molars. The reason for these larger molars is because the Shuk Tanuki eat more vegetation than the ones in Hokkaido. So the Hokkaido Tanuki rely more on fat-rich foods, which help them keep them warm for the winter. So for example, like fish. But the Shuk Tanuki, because they have more access to vegetation, they don't need to rely on heavily fat foods to keep them warm for winter, because the winter in other parts of Japan is not as cold as Hokkaido. They developed these larger molars, which helps them shred apart plant materials. Interestingly, the Tanuki were originally from China, but they moved to Japan during the mid-Pliocene. And for some context, the late Pliocene is when humans started moving out to Africa, into the Americas, and also into Australia. Consequently, this coincided with the extinction of many large-bodied animals. And you can probably guess why, right? So the Japanese Tanuki are smaller than their mainland counterparts, and they also have shorter fur, which is less insulating than the mainland raccoon dogs. So now let's talk a little bit about their appearance. The main thing I want you guys to take away from this is that the Tanuki are absolutely adorable. You guessed it. They're so cute. Look at them. They have this long torso with these little small stumpy legs and a little tail as well, which doesn't touch the ground. And they also have this kind of like black eye mask, which looks like an actual raccoon, which is why they got called raccoon dogs. Another great thing about these Tanuki is that they form lifelong relationships with their partners. So they are strictly monogamous. In the case that one of them dies, then things change. This is really rare in mammal species. Only 3 to 5% of mammal species are actually fully monogamous. Not only are they committed partners, they're also really good dads as well. They really have good parental care by bringing the mother food when she's looking after the pups, and also helping just in general to rear the pups. Another thing which makes these tanuki special, even though we've listed plenty already, they actually hibernate. And you might be thinking, is this not normal for mammals? Yes, it is common in mammals, but it is not common in canids. There's only a few species in the entire world which hibernate, and the tanuki are one of them. Before they do this, like many other animals, they start to eat lots of food before winter, and then kind of make little burrows and then just kind of stay in the burrows for a while. But this is not a complete hibernation, because they can wake up from this state of hibernation if it's a particularly warm day, and then they can go out and then they can kind of go back into the state of hibernation. So it's not a complete hibernation, but it's something. But we briefly mentioned it, but the tanuki are known to eat things such as plants, and they can also eat animals as well, such as birds and fish, and also toxic frogs, which is amazing. They do this by producing a large amount of saliva, and so they can eat these really dangerous frogs, which other animals wouldn't be able to eat. And not only can they eat these natural materials, they also have been shown to scavenge in human settlements as well. So tanuki can be found in places such like this, basically just residential areas, and particularly in Satoyama. And Satoyama is basically like half nature and half human settlements. So there'll be these kind of houses with rice fields, paddy fields, and then there'll be this yama, this mountain. So the tanuki love these places because basically they can just come down from the mountain, scavenge on any rubbish that they find, and then go back into the mountain. So this does make them omnivores and gives them great adaptability in habitats. However, there is a problem with this. At the start of the episode, we mentioned that this raccoon dog could be found in other parts of the world apart from Asia. So actually they have become an invasive species in Europe. Again, like most of the problems in the world, humans started this issue. The raccoon dogs were brought to Russia, and this was because people wanted to hunt them and they wanted their fur, and so they were brought there initially. However, the tanuki, being the great survivors that they are, they managed to move from Russia into Europe, and this created a huge ecological disaster again. Basically, these raccoon dogs, they started eating all of the native animals and plants in the area. And also because they can scavenge on human food, this made the population explode. Even now, there are still conservation programs being put in place to try and get rid of these raccoon dogs, but it is proved to be extremely difficult. So the news about them is not all positive, but yeah, humans caused this at the end of the day, so it's our responsibility to do something about it. So we really can't complain. Okay, you're correct. The tanuki, they have caused a huge ecological disaster in Europe. However, here in Japan, the tanuki actually have a very strong role in protecting nature. They are known as the protectors or guardians of nature here in Japan, and this is because of the ancient folklore which they have around them. In one tale, there is a group of humans which are trying to destroy a forest which the tanuki live in, and so what the tanuki does, believe it or not, the tanuki has shape-shifting abilities. So this tanuki shape-shifted into this terrifying monster and it scared away the people. Not only is there this tale, there's also another tale where this guy, he goes into the forest and then he meets a tanuki, and then the tanuki kind of give him like an enlightening experience about the forest, which causes him to care about the forest. If you're interested in this kind of folklore side, I highly recommend watching the movie Pompoko. It's a Studio Ghibli film, which means it's going to be 10 out of 10. And I totally wasn't watching it last night or anything.
お前は自分の森がこんな目にあって腹立ちまゆれにこの作戦を提案しているのだと見たがどうじゃない？に祝杯をあげた。第一次作戦の立役者高森の本田はどう使ってさような考えではござらぬ。
Honestly, it's so good and basically revolves around a group of Tanuki which live in a forest, and then humans, as humans do, come into the forest and try and, do logging and stuff and try and destroy the forest. So the Tanuki have to come up with an idea, right? So they use their abilities, their shape-shifting abilities to not to kill the people, but just to make their lives extremely inconvenient. And maybe there was one part where they killed someone. Yeah, you can watch it yourself. It's really good, and it really highlights how important the Tanuki are for conservation in Japan and their roles from an ancient time, of like protecting the forest. So yeah, I highly recommend you watch that. Not only do the Tanuki play this really important role in mythology in Japan, relating to conservation, in real life as well, they do play an important role. The Tanuki are known to eat pests such as small rodents, which might be a problem for crops and agriculture, and by keeping these populations in check, humans also benefit as well. Not only this, they also play a huge role in seed dispersal. I'm not going to explain how this works, but you can imagine if the Tanuki eats like a fruit, it eats the seeds, and then you know what's going to happen next. The Tanuki actually have a really important role in ecological balance in the ecosystem, so it's not all just folklore tales. Okay, that's enough about folklore. So actually, no, that's not enough about folklore. So now we're going to be talking about more folklore. If you come to Japan, you might see these statues. But do you know what these statues mean? These statues are of Tanuki, or of the yokai version of Tanuki. And the yokai version of Tanuki in kind of older stories, it was not very good meaning. The Tanuki in the past, they used to play like really harmful tricks on humans and sometimes kill them as well. So they were, in the past, they were a little bit yikes. But now, they're kind of more playful tricksters, using their shape-shifting abilities to play like kind of harmless tricks on humans. But in general, now they're kind of like positive image, which is why they have many statues of them in Japan. We can see there's many different things about this Tanuki statue, right? So the straw hat that they have represents like a warding off of evil, or a warding off of disasters. Their eyes as well means like good awareness of your surroundings. Their big bellies are also a symbol for luck, and the sake cup which they hold represents like a kind of thankfulness for food they're given. So actually, this is a very lucky symbol. If you see these when you're in Japan, it's thought to be like a kind of lucky thing. And better if you have one of them, then you get like more luck. This is why the Tanuki statues, there's many shops which have these Tanuki statues outside, because it's thought to bring financial luck to their business. Whether it does or not, and that brings us to the end of today's podcast on the Japanese Tanuki. How did you enjoy today's episode? And also, what surprised you most about the Tanuki? For me, I had no idea that the Racoon dog was an invasive species in Europe. I've never heard of it, so that was really interesting. I also wasn't aware that the Tanuki was a completely different species from the ones in the mainland, and I also was not aware that we have two different types of subspecies. So I actually learned a lot from doing this episode as well. So tell me what you guys thought and what you guys were most surprised about in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video. ここまで聞いてくださってありがとうございました。また次の動画でお会いしましょう。バイバイ。They actually developed these larger molars, which helps them shred apart. which helps them shred apart which helps them shred apart plant materials. Okay, good. 覚えてない、次。